There is no better teacher than the creator of the art. What's up, guys? So the here, and here we are to do a breakdown and review of chapter 89 of Record of Ragnarok, which is known as Boiling. And I'll admit, I'm worried. I'm so worried for my baby boy. But we got a whole bunch to talk about and oh so little time. So let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. Amy, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact. Uh-oh, y'all. You know what time it is. It's backstory time. So let's give the general thoughts on the backstory before I hop into the implications of the backstory on a certain individual who's gonna currently be me. First things first, I do like the further establishment. I'll admit, as much as I do like the humans' backstories and it's great to get further context for them, I really like learning more about Record of Ragnarok's versions of these mythologies. Now, notably, I'm not as well versed, if versed at all, in Japanese mythology. I'll let you know where all of my information on Japanese mythology comes from. It's 3 sources. It is Persona, Overly Sarcastic Productions, and this manga. So, I have no context for any of this. Oh, and Naruto. 4 sources. So I have no idea about anything about Japanese mythology. But one of my favorite things about Record of Ragnarok is how they reincorporate it and recreate it. And I know some things. I do have questions, like where is Izanami? But regardless, the integration of the different gods, the 3 noble gods, the creator god, and Izanagi, I like pretty much all of their designs too. Izanagi especially, I definitely wish we got like an actual proper face reveal for this one, because they actually look really, really cool. I like their design, the flowing hair, the jewels, the halo behind them. Very, very good. Amaterasu ends up having a nice design too. Overall, it's still a bit strange. I won't hesitate to say that. But still, it's nicely detailed. And hey, I'm happy to get another female god of some sort of importance. Like, notably, numerous female gods should have at least been mentioned more than the offhand cameo or Nepinwame? Lord. Weapon name. I'm looking at you, Artemis. You're telling me we ran through an entire fight with Apollo and we didn't get to see his famous sister once? Oh, Zeus. Is you single, broski? Where's Hera? I got no idea. Oh, Hades, king of the underworld, apparently king of all underworlds. You mean to tell me he doesn't have a wife? Persephone, dread queen of the I don't know. It is strange. So I'm happy that we got Amaterasu at all. Tsukiyomi, once again, we do need to have a more stereotypical god role to play, so he doesn't get the most interesting character, but I think design-wise he's very, very cool. And another detail that I'll admit, I'm still not too fond of it, especially in this chapter. I don't know, he looks extra weird in this chapter. I still do not like Susano's design. I just had a heart attack, because I realized, at least attire-wise, he actually low-key looks like Sinbad from Magi. That bothers me. But, would that be the case? I don't know, I'm still not the biggest fan of his character design, but his story is the highlight of this chapter, and I have to appreciate it myself. Notably, Susano reminds me of many people I've met before in life, because gosh darn it, you run into more prodigies than you think. They're obviously super crazy next level giga prodigies that you'll run into once every few years, but I've met people like Susano, people who were born with a transcendental ability, one that transcends common ability, common knowledge, a need for development, a need for learning, and notably, just like Susano, ultimately, their souls were always calm. But naturally, what this backstory for Susano is meaning to tell is the idea that while Susano's soul was calm, it wasn't necessarily out of the fact that it took active mental effort for him to be calm, or that he had to keep a certain appearance up of his own free will. No, he was just bored. And he swung the sword because he was born the god of the sword. He was just overwhelmingly powerful. The sword was nothing but a tool. The chapter really just calls it a weapon imbued with divine power meant to one-shot everything. And thusly, that's what it did. So ultimately, Susano felt empty. Notably, I like the detail that, at least early on, the man never smiled. For Millie, the very limited time we get to see him. But, look at him. No smile. Still no smile. He's very cold, very stern. Even when he's slaying monsters, getting thanks, he's just calm. And then we see a slight smirk, but he only begins to turn into the Susano we know after he gets his first witness and his first sighting of swordsmanship, real swordsmanship, or kenjutsu, the art of the sword. He finally gets to see it for himself, wielded by a human. Presumably, we don't know how far away this is from his own original sword creation story, but it's clear that he inspired many people. But as has happened before with myself, which is crazy to think about now that I can say that, but I've seen people be inspired by me, and then go on to do things. And this is similar to what happened with Susano. A prodigy who was born with overwhelming power got to see something he never expected before, something that awoke his passion, and the passion was of the contradiction. The ability for a boy this tiny to defeat a man, a monster this big, with no divine power, no overwhelming strength, no special weapon, no, just the blade and the knowledge on how to wield it. And we see the boy manages to slay, well not slay, but at least knock out this giant who was going to take his sister and do bad things with the sister, guys. Right? But with that being the case, it inspires Susano. It wakes something up in him that he never thought would be woken up. A passion, a fever, a feeling, something that he had never really had before. His shock turns to immediate interest, and I'll admit, I do like that. Obviously, I was never a prodigy when I was growing up. I was just a regular dude. The only thing I was prodigious at was yapping. I always could yap. I was born that way. You were born. I was born in the yap. My friends merely adopted it. So, like, I could yap for the longest time. But notably, the passion for yapping definitely is something that needs to come in. And I can understand Susano's lack of passion, and I've seen it before. Like I mentioned, the idea of seeing someone who's good at something naturally see something that actually inspires them to want to get better at the thing they're already good at is great. It's kind of like when you see a person who never had to struggle in life before struggle for the first time, and then they have the 50-50 shot of either breaking down completely or locking in and going even crazier than they were before. And Susano ultimately decides to go just a bit crazier because of the cyclical nature of this story. The boy reveals that ultimately it was Susano who inspired humanity to wield and create the blade. But of course, since they didn't have his divine, overwhelming one-shot power, they need to work in their own ways to do that, which gave birth to swordsmanship. And Susano is inspired by swordsmanship and kenjutsu to the point where he wants to learn it properly. He even prostrates himself before this young boy, who he doesn't even know the name of. The chapter specifically goes out of its way to not give this boy a name, not give his clan a name, not give his village a name, nothing. They are just some sword wielders. And ultimately, that's the big point the chapter's trying to tell. Susano, as mentioned early on by mentioned early on by Brunhild in this chapter, is ultimately one of the few gods, if not the only god, to actively acknowledge humanity, to the point where knowing the greatness of humanity more than anybody else, which is crazy to think about because Hercules was a human, but even he didn't appreciate humanity or respect it as much as Susano, because Susano actively developed and dedicated this respect for them and wanted to learn from them. And we see that ultimately he does sort of realize that this would come with a cost. It would come with something devious, something dangerous, something that he would have to compensate for. And I'll admit, despite getting very little time with this trio of siblings, I actually do kind of like it a lot. Amaterasu, Susano, and Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, they all end up having this discussion. A discussion on the fate of Susano. Considering his desire to learn from humans is innately wrong in the eyes of the gods, he essentially betrayed them, in a sense. No matter how archaic or backwards or stupid you think that thing is, ultimately the gods and the humans are different. Immortal, eternal, unstoppable, and seemingly enough almighty, versus fragile, short-lived, and great in number. So thusly, it's an affront to even dare to try and learn from them, which goes to show that no other god really tried to beforehand. But Susano knew this and was willing to take the risk and even was willing to step away from his position. Notably, the chapter earlier on sets up the idea that Susano is not some random deity or just the god of the sword. No, he's the ruler of the earth. Like, he's straight up its king, in a sense. Of course, the earth is his very limited realm of mythology, considering we don't see him interact with any other deities, but still, that was his jurisdiction. But ultimately, since he was so passionless, so soulless before, now that he finally found something that brings him passion, something that was born of his own actions, who knows how long ago, to the point where he doesn't even know when they initially came up with swordsmanship, he's excited. His heart is boiling over. He's finally feeling something for the first time in who knows how long he's been alive, ever since Izanagi created him. And it makes him all smiles. It makes him happy. And ultimately, Amaterasu is a good big sister in this case, where she allows Susano to do exactly what he wants, but with a cost, to the shock of Tsukuyomi, where she ultimately gives a stipulation: yeah, sure, you can learn from them, but from a distance, and you ain't coming back here no more. So Susano was banned from the Takamagahara. Gosh darn it! I can't say it, at least not without looking at it. Takamagahara? I'm not, whatever. I can't, I'm sorry, I'm bad at it. He was banned from heaven. essentially. The realm of Amaterasu, he was banned from it permanently. Now, this does raise the question of, was he just banned from this heaven? And then, like, not the heaven that apparently Record of Ragnarok is taking place in, because he's fighting right now. Like, obviously, he wasn't permanently banned or something. Like, notably, she does sentence him to an external exile, or no, an eternal exile, but I guess maybe the situation called for him being welcomed back. We don't necessarily know. I honestly wouldn't be too mad to get a second part of this backstory, just to see, like, his recruitment into the tournament, considering, obviously, his notoriety and ability was valuable enough that Zeus was like, bring, 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 bring. Yeah, Amaterasu. I know you said that boy was banned, but for real, we could use a little sword wielder like that. Bring him back here. So I want to kind of see that, further delve into that, because we see he left behind his crown, he left behind his power, his status, his dignity, all that, in order to essentially turn into a recluse. We see him transform into a bird and just fly literally throughout history, watching and observing and consuming every single sword style, which is most likely what ultimately gave birth to his Shinra Yayorozu, his ultimate sword style, which is the combination and the fullness and the entirety of swordsmanship. But notably, a detail that I really like is that in spite of all this, in spite of him literally mimicking the very man he's fighting, developing his own fighting style based on what he saw from Soji, the strongest Hikitori in all of history, there still is a fundamental difference between Susano and Soji, Susano and humanity. Despite his deep passion, his deep desire to learn from humanity, to be like one of them and delve himself deep into the art of Kenjutsu, the art of the sword, ultimately, he was an exile. He couldn't directly learn from them. He couldn't directly interact with them. And he was also banned from the heavens. Meaning he couldn't necessarily have direct conflict. He couldn't directly really interfere with anything at all. So while his heart was boiling over, while his soul was filled up deep to the depths with this passion that he never felt before, he could only express it by himself, alone in a cave, watching others through mirrors, ultimately absorbing the principles, absorbing the basis, and creating something that was ultimately his own in the Shinra Yayorozu that confuses swordsmanship across all of history and fuses them together into something basically unstoppable. But it's the reason why Soji's formless style from last chapter still worked, and likely is going to still have an effect on Susano. Because ultimately, all Susano has is theory. And theory just may not be enough in this case, as he seems to somewhat acknowledge based on his interactions from last chapter and what Sasaki and Musashi note for Soji at the beginning of this chapter. The idea that ultimately the reason his blade is formless yet dangerous, the ability to compose an aura totally of complete darkness and death, but ultimately without any slaughterous intent, is because of the experience. Susano was swinging his sword around in a cave. He never fought anything. Heck, it's not even established whether or not after his exile, if he still played any of his role as ruler of the earth, and like slayed monsters or anything. None of that's really established. So Susano ultimately is testing himself for the first time against arguably the greatest, or at least one of the greatest sword masters in history. He's obviously the greatest Hikitori, but like Soji versus Sasaki, for example, is definitely a toss-up, but I'd most likely give that to Sasaki. Yeah, as much as I love Soji. I have to give this... Where's my brain lagging? I have to give this to Sasaki in terms of Sasaki versus Soji, just based on what show you've shown so far. But that's the thing. We're essentially seeing a diametric opposite in this battle that I really like. A lot of regular Ragnarok fights are based around that, but I do love this idea of this opposite in particular. We're getting to see a man who was enraptured by swordsmanship and viewed it as something to consume and become one with because it made him feel passionate, but ultimately he could never properly engage with. This is his first real battle in possibly who knows how many thousands of years. Once again, let's get that second part of that backstory where you get to see where he was fighting out elsewhere. But Soji is different. Soji is a man who could tell just off a glance, he didn't see the backstory, he could tell that ultimately Susano really loves swordsmanship. He's passionate about it. He can see that fever, that desire, that need, that want within him. Because he's seen it many times before. He's fought it many times before. He's seen things that Susano never has. He's felt things Susano never has. Because Soji was born a man. Susano was born a god. A god who could fly through time and witness all swordsmanship and absorb it into himself. But ultimately, in a way, despite Susano's undeniable and unstoppable swordsmanship, he's still green. This is his first real battle wielding those arts, and who knows how long. If this is not his first battle ever. Well, this is just another bout to Soji. Now that he has a blade that can cut even the gods, ultimately, it's his job, his duty, and his role to fight here. So this is a battle of theory versus experience, idea versus application, and seeing if the idea of perfection can overwhelm the perfection born of actual action. And I love that. Honestly, the underlying themes of this battle make me extremely excited, and it's why this end of the page does have me a bit worried, though. Worried for my boy, because not only did my main man Susano get a backstory buff, but also his blade changes. He's evolving, he's growing, he's getting experience that he's never had before, he's feeling things he never felt before, he's boiling over. And of course, when anyone enters a flow state, they only become better. And we've seen some of what Soji has to offer already, some of his depths, from his innate abilities all the way up to his formless style and apparently his strongest traditional thrust, the 3-stage thrust. And as shown, Soji was no more than something to study, something to copy, something to understand, something to infuse into Susano's own blade. So we're going to see a man, or a god, who consumed all of nature, all of humanity's history, all of their knowledge of the blade, up against a man who's only known one. And we're going to see how that ends up working out, how Soji's going to be forced to respond to this god who wants to make him boil. And to that I say I'm very, very, very excited. So overall, here, a very, very, very W chapter. Amazingly W chapter. I love it. I love it. Giving this extra characterization to Susano is really, really nice. Giving Soji this sort of opponent that I honestly never really expected him to have is also very, very nice. I'm interested to see how this battle progresses here, and I'm still definitely worried for my son. But overall, if you made it to the way, all the way to the end of this video, please do me a favor and leave Art of the Heart. Art of the Heart in the comment section down below. I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that little notification bell so you not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month. You get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. So those perks will include the 37-minute, golly, that boy was beefy. I lost complete track of time when I was recording that bad boy. But the 37-minute live reaction to this very chapter, ad-free variations of all my videos, and if you become a $25 Patreon and $25 member, you can order whatever video you want. Also for 25 beans, you can drop a one-time donation to my Ko-Fi link in the description down below to request any video you desire. And if you want to do a shorter video, a little $5 donation, more than happy to compensate that for you. But with that being the case, I'd like to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Back on the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members: Kleiner Plays, Greyhound, Kids Void, Astro, Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, G Prosper, Paris Arnold, King Sukuna, and NMA. I'd like to give a thank you to our $5 patrons: Steron, Sean, Owexian, Midnight Lord 21, Kevin Encarnacion, Josh Brown, John Malcolm, and Igneal Lynn. And I'd like to give another thank you to our $7 member, Autumn Mornings Lazo. And I'd like to give a big old thank you to our $10 members, Robbie Uchiha and Jay Warrior. And I'd like to give another big old thank you to our $10 patrons, Panda Goat, Joaquin Munoz, and Idemokami. And finally, I'd like to give a big, hefty, gargantuan thank yous to our $25 patron, China Doll 09. I'd like to give another gargantuan toe-curling slobba-nabba, dabba-dabba thank you to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.